The other day I was looking up scary aquatic animals, and once again I came across the alligator snapping turtle. As I was scrolling through photos of this giant creature, I was reminded of the same question I first asked myself 3 years ago. What if alligator snapping turtles were large enough to swallow you whole? This awesome piece of artwork was made by Hardy Fowler for the rulebook of the Wild Imaginary West RPG, and I'm going to be recreating it as a diorama today. The machine in the artwork is one of these, a Piper class mech made from a cart or a wagon and some mechanical parts, and the first step in today's build is to kitbash another one. I started the build using a 1 to 72nd scale car cab as the base of the vehicle. And if you ever have a desire to do kit bashing of your own, a sprue like this is a great place to start. Just look at all of these little repurposable gems. After assembling the cab, the driver's seat, and the main body of the vehicle, I moved on to expanding it with various bits and details to give it more personality and functionality. Each of the mechs in the West is unique to its owner. While most of the technology of the Wild West has core components that are the same from one to the next, the exterior and attachments vary widely depending on the needs of their owners. The technology behind those core components was banned back in the East, and it made its way out west where there was no regulation or enforcement, and it was able to advance and grow in whatever field that it was implemented. For most, the combination of mech and forestall is used to get people safely from point A to point B through monster territory. In the case of the Piper class mech, its primary use is for medium-range hunting trips. It carries a decent amount of ammunition and supplies, it can carry 2 people, and provides safety from many small and medium-sized monsters because of its larger forestall, which a horse cannot carry. In the case of the monster encounter that I'm making here, an alligator snapping turtle would easily destroy a Piper if it got close enough to strike. The nice thing though is that monsters will generally focus their attacks on the mechs, giving humans the ability to strategize, because the mechs are seen as like another animal, and most of these monsters are not smart enough to realize that it's the humans that are doing the piloting. After the top section was done, I moved on to the long bird-like legs from which the mech class gets its name. The other classes all get their name from different animals as well. Those are the dowitcher, the mule, and the dromedary. And speaking of human pilots, the last thing to add to this mech was the pilot. I didn't have a miniature in the correct pose. I was able to do surgery onto other models and came up with something that I liked. With that, the Piper was done, and it was time to start working on the base. I grabbed a medium-sized canvas board, made sure that the spacing would look natural, and after that I grabbed the star of the show, the alligator snapping turtle himself, which some of you may recognize from his first appearance on this channel 3 years ago. A link to this model will be in the description. I grabbed a pencil and traced out a rough outline of the river and then broke out some pink insulation foam, which I began cutting with my utility knife. I shaved it down semi-carefully, trying to avoid my fingers until I had the rough shape of a river that I was happy with. What I wasn't happy with was the angle of the turtle because of the height of the back legs, so I sliced those off as well as the tail off camera on my bandsaw. After that, it looked a lot better. I was happy with how things were looking, so I began gluing things down using some foam-safe superglue. Along with the foam riverbanks, I also threw down some larger molded resin and plaster rocks, and after that, I covered the riverbed with Mod Podge and threw down some smaller rocks, which I guess are called pebbles, and then some smaller pebbles, which I guess you'd call sand. Once the surface was covered, I cleared away a spot for the turtle's stumpy legs to go, and then I glued that in place as well. After a few smaller bits of texture for good measure, I soaked everything with isopropyl alcohol and watered down white glue. I went above and beyond with the white glue. I decided to get all the steps out of the way that required a decent amount of dry time, so I mixed up some Sculptamold with a little bit too much water. Sometimes you get that for eyeballing. I patted it down on the shore, and I waited 24 hours. It was now dry and ready to be covered with a final layer of mud effects from Vallejo, which was the last step before I could prime the whole thing black and get it painted. Once that was done, I took it outside and I gave it a coat from the rattle can. I got the minis on painting handles and primed those outside while I was at it. I was also able to repurpose this Brachiosaurus plaque from a couple videos ago. After those had also been primed black, I started painting. And while I paint these, I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons, as well as tell you all a little story. A couple videos ago, I mentioned that you might be seeing more scrapes and scratches on my delicate little hands because I was doing some DIY work on my house. Last week, I mentioned that I had tetanus on my mind, and those things are related. I was doing a bit of demo on part of my house, and like a dingus, I didn't flip over a board right away that I knew had nails in it. I thought to myself, I'll remember to flip that. I began paying attention to something else, and then I stepped back onto said board and immediately remembered that I had not remembered to flip that. It wasn't a very thick nail, but it was a little rusty and definitely long enough to get all the way through the relatively thick sole of my shoe and a decent distance into my foot. The third question that went through my mind after stepping on the nail was, when did I last get a tetanus shot? I was doubtful that I'd get tetanus from an old nail that was in a ceiling for 50 years, rather than rusting in the dirt, but still, it had been a long time, longer than 10 years for sure, so I thought I might as well go and get that updated. This isn't the last rusty thing that I will encounter, and tetanus would be a bummer of a way to go. I just finished a book called Cowboys, Mountain Men, and Grizzly Bears, and I'm shocked at both the fragility and durability of humans. Not that long ago, you could get bit by a little dog or poked by a nail, travel through the Sierra Nevadas during winter, and you were almost for sure toast. On the other hand, someone could get mauled by a grizzly bear or scalped and live to a ripe old age, with nothing but some massive scars and a cool new nickname. All that to be said, I take for granted the fact that I live in a time where if I feel a slight bit of concern about contracting tetanus, all I have to do is drive to Safeway. After the miniatures had been painted, I removed them from their painting bases and I glued them in place. And then I applied a clear coat over top of those freshly painted minis to protect them from the next step, which is the resin river. This is going to be quite a shallow pour, so I decided to make a dam out of masking tape, sealed with hot glue at the bottom for some better leak proofing. I don't typically recommend doing it this way, but if you're in a pinch and you have to get a YouTube video out on time, it works. I mixed up my 2-part epoxy, which is yellowing a little bit, but that's okay. It adds to the realism when combined with a little bit of alpine blue. After mixing thoroughly and popping all the tiny bubbles that came to the surface, it was time to pour. I used a popsicle stick to prevent any additional bubbles from forming. The pour went great. The tape had no leaks, but the weight caused one side to bend a little bit, so I reinforced that with some more popsicle sticks, and that did the trick. I left that to cure, which happened way faster than I had anticipated, which did cause a little bit of warping on the surface, but I wasn't actually bummed about that. It meant I could work on it sooner, and I was going to be covering the surface of the water with some additional texture anyways. I used Woodland Scenic's realistic water ripples and a popsicle stick to try and give the water a little bit of extra motion. I followed that with some white water effects around the turtle's left foot where it would be disturbing the surface. I let the water surface cure for a couple hours, and then I added the trees, and after that the last thing to do was to clean up the sides of the diorama. This past Friday, we launched the digital content for the Wild Imaginary West RPG to all the Kickstarter backers, and we're so excited to have it out in the world for people to enjoy, at least in its digital form. All of that will be available for sale on runefoundry.com sometime soon, so even if you missed the Kickstarter, you can still get your hands on it. After the sides of the diorama had been finished, I called it good. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.